It's 2:00 and we're going to start this very interesting crash course that we're so excited to talk about a new topic for us about ad fraud. And a big welcome to you, Dr. Fou, live from New York, Midtown.
Thank you, Andreas.
We've been looking forward to having you with us to talk about how ad fraud is stealing a lot of our budgets, or at least shed some light on this topic. And just to briefly introduce you're an independent ad fraud researcher based in New York, where you also teach digital strategy. You're the former senior vice president at Omnicom Group and CDO also at Omnicom's healthcare consultancy group, and you've handled quite big budgets as well. And I believe you started your career at McKinsey. So quite a resume, and we're very happy to have you with us today. The agenda for this attention crash course is, of course, about ad fraud. So I'm going to briefly introduce you all to who we are at Adjust, what we work with, then setting the scene for how big is the ad fraud problem. And then Dr. Fou will show you a lot of examples, show the categories of digital ad fraud, how this is going on, what you can do about it as an advertiser, how you can see through it and detect the bot traffic, the fraudulent sites, etc., that may affect your campaigns. And then in the end, we can take some of the questions you might have out there. So a big welcome to all of you attending today. So just briefly, who are we at Adjust? We're an agency, a creative agency, dedicated to driving better business outcomes through what we call the power of digital creative excellence. So what we actually do is that in a typical marketing setup, you have the advertising agency or production agency maybe helping you as a company generate all the great content, the brand universes, TV commercials, whatever. And in the other end of the process, you have the media agency doing all the insights, the target groups, the media buying, strategy, etc. And we kind of squeeze in the middle. We take all the material you got, be it images, brand movies, case movies, and sometimes even if you don't have any assets, we animate from the bottom, and we turn it all, we adjust it into powerful digital creatives in order to get more attention, create more interaction with your target group across all digital channels and platform, because that's where the magic happens and the business outcomes, they derive from your ability to actually create attention and engagement with your marketing. So that's what we do. I'm just going to show you an example here. A campaign we did together with a Danish company called 3 Mobile. They did a great TV, created a great TV commercial here with their advertising agency, a brand universe called La Familia, kind of a mafia theme. So I'm just going to show you the TV commercial, and then afterwards, you're going to see how we transform that campaign into all digital channels. So please hang on, and I'll just play a video for you here.
For mig betyder familien alt. Vi respekterer hinanden, og vi løfter i flok. Vi kigger hinanden i øjnene, og vi tager os tid til at samles.
Ja, når I står sammen som familie, kommer det alle til gode. I får fri tale og fri data, og jo flere I er, jo billigere bliver det. Få 3 Family i din 3-butik eller på 3.dk.
And now without the sound, we'll just see how this is, how the movie is cut and adjusted, and the overlays with animation, the CTAs, all that across, adjusted to all the channels, all the medias, where you do your media buying in order to get the most attention and create the positive emotions at your target group. You know, it doesn't matter whether it's SoMe, whether what it is, no matter your media plan or marketing setup, we can transform your material to excel there. Just going back to my presentation here. So just further down the funnel, we took the same material, created interactive sliders where you can adjust, the number of people in your family, then what is the price. Again, when it was summer, getting ready for holidays, we took the same creative assets and we created a new campaign. So you can be constantly relevant in your marketing setup. You can, create great campaigns on the go all the time. So that's actually what we do. Back on the topic here on ad fraud, because that's why you're here today. Again, we're going to shed light on this because it's the best thing we can do in order to avoid the fraud going on. And normally we say a lot of reach, a lot of spend is wasted because it doesn't get the active attention because it's simply maybe bad campaigns or bad creatives not generating any attention. But with the theme today, I was also wondering how much of the impressions and clicks, etc., generated is not giving any results because of ad fraud, and that is, of course, what we're going to talk about here. And we have some huge numbers. This is the global ad spend this year in 2023, 638 billion euros spent on digital advertising, a huge amount. And where there's a lot of money, there's also often a lot of people trying to get their part of it. According to Filter It, up to 45% of this spend could be wasted to ad fraud or some kind of fraudulent traffic and site. It's a high number. Different companies give other numbers, maybe 25% or 15%. I'm sure, Dr. Fou, you have some numbers as well. But it's also spreading across channels. If we take the Facebook here, in the first quarter of 2023, they removed 426 million fake accounts, among other things, created in order to generate some kind of fake traffic and effect in the world of advertising. And the crazy part is that that number is actually a decline from previous quarters, previous years. So it's been a massive problem for these SoMe platforms as well. If we go to LinkedIn, there's a lot of talk going on about also their audience network being some kind of fraudulent or filled with bots as well. And as you know, all of you doing LinkedIn marketing, they push it, in order to get you to enable this audience network, and they promise you a lot of great results. So this is one of the things you have to be aware of, that it might not be a good thing. Then we have all the so-called made for advertising websites being created in order to just host a lot of ads and video ads and try to get as many impressions as possible, but without them having any real value. And one of the problem is that marketing is a numbers game, and of course it is, and it should be in some ways. And the made for advertising sites delivers a lot of those numbers that we're actually hunting and we're hoping for, in terms of viewability, in terms of clicks, in terms of a low CPM. They're good at doing this. But again, there's no real people behind this or no real value behind this. So that's why this topic is highly important to all advertisers, all companies spending money doing marketing. And with that, I'm gonna hand over the microphone to you. Dr. Fou, you can share your screen and take over the presentation. And again, thanks for being with us. And we've been looking forward to hearing what you have brought us today. So take it away.
Thank you, Andreas. Good morning from New York. Very happy to be here with all of you. I wanted to just point your attention to the chat window. There's an interactive section coming up in my deck where we'll kind of go through some slides together. And if you have any questions while I'm presenting, please type it into the chat and I'll try to look at those and address them as I go along. And then at the end, we'll have an interactive portion where we're going to look at some data together. All right, so I'm sure all of you have heard of ad fraud, and basically, the amount of it, people are aware that it's going up constantly over the years. I've been studying this problem for the last 11 years. Since I left Omnicom, the big agency, I started looking at data, and there were some really strange things in the data. For example, 200% click-through rates. And some of those clicks came after we turned off the campaign. So clearly something was strange or wrong about that. But no one had a good explanation of what that was. So 11 years ago, I started building a set of tools to look into why we were getting, some abnormal numbers. But let me take a step back and kind of level set with all of you in terms of what ad fraud is and what ad fraud isn't, and then we can go into some concrete examples. So here, this is probably the most basic understanding of ad fraud. It's basically, instead of humans looking at web pages and generating those ad impressions, it's bots or software programs that are generating the ad impressions. And clearly that's not what the advertisers thought they were getting. And this particular problem of fraud is very large in the digital world. Of course, there were forms of ad fraud before in the physical world, but the problem is uniquely large in digital. And that's because we no longer have the physical constraints of the physical world, right? If you look at the left-hand side, it's kind of a funny picture where there's only so many billboards you can stick by the side of the road until you run out of physical space. But in digital, if you look on the right-hand side, this is an example of a website from many, many years ago where there's no content at all, right? It was designed solely to carry as many ads as possible. Right? So all of those itemized ads are ads on the page, right? So back then we didn't call them MFA websites, right? Made for advertising websites, but yet they existed since the beginning of digital advertising. And so the scale of it is much larger in digital because we're dealing with bits and bytes. So we're no longer limited by the physical constraints of the physical world, right? So bad guys can create unlimited fake websites. Bad guys can create unlimited mobile apps for the purpose of committing ad fraud, which is running as many ad impressions as possible. So in this world, let us actually focus on these top two forms of fraud, right? So in every type of ad in digital, there's a fraud associated with it. But we will focus on these top two called impression fraud and click fraud, because those two types of fraud account for about 90% of the digital spend. Okay, so where the biggest money is, the bad guys are going to follow the money and try to steal from those buckets. Okay, so before I go on to the next section, just think of a number in your mind, right? So Andreas said before, we're spending over 600 billion euros in digital worldwide. And we've seen numbers all over the place, right? Whether it's 15% fraud or 25% fraud or even 45% fraud. So just think of a number in your mind, and maybe if you're open to it, type it into chat. I'd like to see what people think the level of fraud is, just from your current understanding of it, before I talk about what I think it is. So anyone courageous enough to just type it into the chat, I'll keep an eye on that. Okay, hopefully we'll have some numbers coming in. But basically, let me show you what's happening in the US. So a lot of my large clients are in North America, and there's a trade association called Association of National Advertisers. So they represent the largest of advertisers in North America. And if you look at this chart, it's basically every year for the last 6 years, they've sent out press releases that say fraud is in the 1% range. And the most recent one from 2022 said that fraud is in the 0.98%, right? It's even less than 1%. But because of this, a lot of the advertisers have kind of put their guard down, right? So they think that fraud is not a big problem. So they continue pouring money into digital, not realizing that they're wasting the majority of it. All right, I see some numbers coming in. Some people think it's 30%, others think it's much higher. So I like those, the much higher numbers. And the reason why the trade associations think it's so low is because they're citing numbers from the legacy fraud verification companies. So you might have heard of them. It's Double Verify and Integral Ad Signs and maybe Moat or something like that. So if you look at a screenshot from one of their reports, it's basically 1% ad fraud, right, across the board. So they think it's 1%. But the way I like to think of it is the 1% that they report is all the fraud they can catch, not all the fraud there is. And let me explain why that's the problem. So here you're looking at a code snippet, right? So a little bit of code that a bot maker used to detect the IAS pixel. So they're looking for the fraud detection tags or pixels and deliberately blocking them so that these fraud verification vendors have no data. Okay. Now you would wonder, why is that a problem, right? It's a problem because these vendors assume that when they have no data, there is no fraud. Okay, let me say that one more time slowly. If they have no data on it, they assume it's not fraud. I mean, as a researcher and with common sense, you can probably assume that's not the right interpretation, right? You should probably assume that there is fraud because the bad guys are very clever and they're very adept at stealing money. Okay, but don't take my word for it. Let me show you this chart. Okay, this is taken from one of the fraud verification vendors' own reports. Okay, I'm going to draw your eye to the first row here. Okay, the delivery site is labeled as NA. Okay, that means they did not detect or they don't know where the ad went, right? They don't have a site, they don't have a mobile app, they don't know where the ad went. Okay. Now, if you read across here, at the very right-hand side, you'll see even though they don't know what site or app the ad went to, they still marked it as 100% fraud-free. Okay, so just think about that for 1 second to see if you think that's a correct answer. Okay. Now, the other problem that we can see in this slide, again, just focusing on the first row, is the difference between measured impressions and monitored ads. Okay, so monitored ads is 781 million. Okay, so it's almost 800 million total quantity of ads. Measured impressions means they measured it with a JavaScript tag. That means their detection tag was run so that they can collect data. So if you divide around 80 million by 800 million, that's about 1 in 10. That's 10%. Okay. So they measured only 1 in 10 ads with a JavaScript tag. That means they didn't measure 9 in 10 ads, but they still marked it as 0% fraud incident rate and 100% fraud free. Okay. How is that correct? Okay. So basically I can show customers, their these vendors' own data and say, that's not right. They should not be marking what they didn't measure as fraud free. Okay, so that's a key issue, and that's why they're detecting so few bots. But if you take a look at what's been happening in the last 10 years, we actually see this gap opening up. Okay, so this is a macro view, and I'm citing some numbers from a company called Pew Internet. So they've been tracking humans' usage of the internet, social media, and mobile over the last 25 years. Right, so if you look at this plot dating all the way back to 2004, you'll see 3 lines on here: a blue one, a yellow, and a green line. Okay, the yellow and green lines stand for humans' usage of the internet, social media, and mobile. And if you kind of notice, both of these lines are horizontal, meaning they've plateaued. Okay, so that means that the total time, the total number of humans, and the total time they spend using the internet, social media, and mobile have all maxed out. That's the maximum possible they could use the internet, social media, and mobile. But yet, the blue line continues shooting up, right? So normally, it's when a person visits a web page or when a person uses a mobile app, that's when the ads show, right? So it's supposed to correspond to humans' usage of media. But yet, we're seeing this dramatic rise in the blue line and this larger and larger gap, which we put in red, right? So I'm calling it unknown delta, but we kind of know what that is, right? It's automated activity generated by bots for fraudulent purposes, right? So now the quantities are so out of whack with reality that there's, I think, 20 trillion bid requests per week or more than that. And you can imagine there's only 7 billion humans on Earth, half of whom don't have internet connections or smartphones, right? So the numbers are so far out of whack that you can say that the majority of what we're seeing in digital marketing right now are ads shown to bots and not to humans. Okay, but again, that's very, very hard to believe. So let me get back to some of the stuff that I've seen. Okay, the legacy fraud verification companies are focused on detecting bots, and these are fake visitors going to websites. But as you know, in the last 10 years or so, more and more of the digital ad spending has moved into mobile apps and also now CTV, connected TV. So if the technology is only looking for bots, you'll see this 1.5% number right here. They're only going to detect a small number of bots because now there's many other forms of fraud that they're not necessarily looking for or detecting. Okay, so things like ad stacking, pixel stuffing, forced redirects, ad slot refreshing. So they're just refreshing the ad every 1 second, or mobile apps like a keyboard app loading ads in the background and doing it continuously overnight. Most of those other forms of fraud are not caught by the legacy fraud verification companies. So therefore, the number that they report is very, very low compared to the reality of ad fraud, right? So in this case, it's almost 60%, but yet they're still only reporting the 1.5%. Okay. So that said, for advertisers, basically, despite the use of these fraud verification vendors, this is what I'm still seeing in the data. Okay, so you can kind of surmise that the orange and red are bots, right? And blue means humans, specifically the dark blue. So across 15 different programmatic campaigns, we can see that the vast majority of the clicks that advertisers are receiving are bot clicks, not humans, right? So roughly 96 to 99% of the clicks come from bots, and only 1 to 4% of the clicks are the dark blue, right? Come from humans. So when Andreas was saying earlier, when you focus on the wrong metrics like clicks, you're going to get easily tricked into thinking that your programmatic campaigns are working really well because you're getting a whole bunch of clicks from them, right? You're getting a lot of clicks. But when you're just using Google Analytics, you're not going to see the difference between a click coming from a bot and a click coming from a human. So you're simply counting the quantities, right? And you think that you're getting a lot of clicks coming from these campaigns, right? So I see a question in chat. Someone asked if there's experience with fraud clicks on Google Ads. Of course, there's lots and lots of fraudulent clicks coming from Google Ads, specifically the ones that run on search partner sites, right? So when the ads run on Google itself, there's far less fraud because there's many more humans who Google things, right? So when you Google something and then some of the search results that show up, you see the paid search ads at the very top. Those are fine. Those are shown to humans. But when you talk about search partner sites, that means these are sites and mobile apps that are outside of the main property. And so those sites have both the motive and the means to commit fraud because they want to earn more money. They're going to use bots to not only cause the ad to load, but also click on it, right? So that's called CPC fraud. That's the second type of fraud that we mentioned earlier. Okay. So getting back to this slide, you can see that despite the use of fraud verification companies, there's still rampant fraud. And that's because those legacy fraud verification companies are not seeing the majority of this fraud. Okay. And then here's an example for some of you who are doing CTV, connected TV advertising. You can see on this left side, the format is CTV, but yet on the right-hand side, you see that these ads that are supposed to be running on a big screen TV are actually going to websites. So when you're paying CTV type prices, right, typically in the $70 to $120 CPMs, you want your ads to be showing on a big TV screen, not on websites. Okay, but this is an example where they deliberately mismarked the inventory, right? So your ads are going to websites, not to the CTV. Okay, so that's a form of fraud, but most advertisers don't know it. Now, sometimes you're going to see this in your own data, right? So some of you might have noticed that in your own Google Analytics, you're seeing things like 90% or 99% bounce rate. That means the user that got to your page left right away, okay? Or maybe 1 page per session, or maybe even like 1 second time on site, right? those are visitors that came from your paid media that are not very valuable to you, right? Because you would expect that if the person deliberately clicked on the ad, they would actually want to do something on your site, right? So again, you might already have some clues, but let me add a few more data points, right? So when we're looking at our data, okay, these are basically click charts. We're looking to see if the users actually did anything on your website, right? Obviously, the users that left in 1 second couldn't do anything on your website, and this shows that, right? There's no clicks seen at all. So these are visitors that are simply not valuable to you, okay? So, if you go back into your own Google Analytics, you'll start to figure out some of this paid media is just not working, okay? And that's because of the activity of the bots. Okay. So collectively, let me just talk a little bit about the impact on marketers. There haven't been a lot of these case studies because it's somewhat embarrassing for the advertisers to admit that their digital marketing is not working. But let me show you the few examples that we have seen over the years. Okay. So here's an example from P&G, Procter & Gamble. They cut $200 million from their digital ad spending, and they saw no impact, no change in business outcomes. Okay. Here's another example. Chase reduced their programmatic reach by 99%. The way they did that is by reducing the number of websites that showed their ads from 400,000 websites showing their ads to just 5,000 websites showing their ads. But despite that decrease of 99% of their reach, they got the same results, no change in business outcomes. Okay, so the question is, what were all those ads being shown to if they didn't produce any business outcomes? Okay, a final example would be Uber. Uber cut 80% of their digital spending, and they were basically paying for campaigns to get more people to install the Uber app. So they were planning to spend $150 million on that. They cut 80% of that, or $120 million, and saw no change in app installs. So what that meant is that humans installed the Uber app because they wanted to, not because they saw an ad and clicked on it and then installed the app. So they are currently suing 100 mobile exchanges for falsifying the data, for fabricating the log level data. Right? So this is a form of fraud in the app install space, and Uber basically found that out. Okay, so the fraud is much, much more rampant than most people think it is. Okay, so here's a few other examples. I'll share this deck afterwards, and anyone who wants to get a copy of that can contact Andreas, and he can share it with you. But now let me move on to a few slides to talk about some of the data that we can see. Okay, I'll pause here for just a second, see if there's anyone who has any questions on some of the background material that I just went through. Okay, feel free to type it into chat anytime. I'm going to keep an eye on that. Okay, so let me show you a few charts that come from my platform. Okay, so over the last 11 years, I built a set of tools for me to help clients audit their campaigns. So these are some screenshots that we take from that. So what you're looking at here are the click locations on a particular web page, and these are grouped by different screen sizes. Right? So 1920 by 1080, you'll recognize as a screen resolution, a desktop monitor. Right? 1366 by 768, you'll recognize as a laptop screen. Okay, so in this case, you're seeing where the clicks are, and I'm going to draw your eyes to some of these dots, right? These are individual click locations, but you'll see a natural clustering of the clicks because humans have to click on site navigation, buttons, and links, right? So there's a logical place where they're clicking on these. Okay, so very similarly, if we look at mobile screen resolutions, we can see the same phenomenon, right? So individual clicks spread out across the screen, and then some natural clustering to where the clicks occur. Okay, so now if you look at this chart, I'm going to ask the audience, can you tell which one of these charts show bot clicks? I'm going to give you a second and then just type it into the chat so I can see. Okay, any guesses before I reveal? Okay, it's going to be the bot clicks are the lower right, this one in red. Okay, so again, these first two you've seen from the previous slide. So this is where humans click, right? So this is the typical click pattern across the face of the website. And then these lower two on the left-hand side are mobile screens. So basically what you're seeing here on the lower right are repeated clicks on the same pixel location, right? The same XY coordinate on screen. So just think for a second, is it possible to get a whole bunch of humans to click on the exact same pixel on screen, right? That's just not possible. But for a bot, it's very easy, right? Just the bot maker says, click on this XY coordinate, and they just repeatedly click it. So when we see larger circles like this, I'm just trying to show you this as kind of a simple visualization where we can actually tell the difference between bot clicks and human clicks.
And we actually saw that too. Sorry, Dr. Fou. Just adding, because we have analytics on most of our creatives as well, and some years back, we started to see a lot of clicks coming in the very top left corner, like a place where no one would click or could click.
Yes, I have seen that as well. That's perfect, and that's a great setup for the next couple of slides here.
Yeah, exactly. So it was very obvious, and we were able to not include all those fraudulent clicks.
Yeah, so those are clicks that should not be counted. That's correct. So basically, over the years, bot activity has enabled these couple things, right? So large quantities of ads, because if the bots are repeatedly loading web pages, they can generate enormous quantities of ad impressions, far more than humans can, right? Because of that, and because of these fraudulent websites, they're able to sell the ads at much, much lower CPMs. So again, this makes it very attractive for advertisers because they think they're getting a deal, right? If they're getting lower CPMs, they think they're saving money. But unfortunately, they're buying so much more quantity of these fraudulent ads, they end up wasting more money, right? So low CPMs don't mean that you're getting the right kind of stuff if you take into account ad fraud. And then the same bots that are causing the ads to load are also clicking on them. So that tricks the advertisers into thinking that the ads are performing well, right? And the last point of this is it's covered up for years by the legacy fraud vendors because they failed to detect the fraud. Even though it's an obvious bot, they failed to see it. So by reporting 1% fraud for years and years, most of the advertisers think that fraud is low, and so they kept pouring money into it. Okay. So now, like Andreas was saying, we can actually use this tool, my tool set called Fou Analytics. We can actually look at the click locations. And here's an example where our tag is in the ad itself. Okay, so here's 4 ads that are 300 by 250 in size, and each green dot is where the users were clicking. So can you tell what the users were trying to click on in these 4 examples? I'm going to pause a second. Everyone type it into chat. We have an interactive section coming up, so I'm going to need all of you to be ready to type in some answers into chat in just a few minutes. Okay, so based on these click locations, you can actually see that most of the dots were in the upper right-hand corner where the X is and where the ad choices button is. So most of these users were trying to close the ad, not click the ad. Okay, so again, these examples would be clicks that you don't want to be counting in your program. Whereas if you contrast it to these 5 examples, again, notice the yellow rectangle is a 300 by 250 ad unit. The blue dots, which are click locations, are spread out across the face of the ad, right? So that makes a lot more sense because they're trying to click on the ad, right? And if we actually look at what was clicked, you can see addclick.g.doubleclick, right? So that's the click tracker. So we know that that was what was clicked when they clicked on the ad. So between these 2 pieces of information, we can now corroborate that these are the clicks that we do want to count because the users were actually trying to click on the ad. And if we look at where the ads are coming from, again, this is a North American campaign. So, some of these publishers you may or may not recognize, but some of these are from good publishers' websites, right? So when we see clicks from humans, they tend to come from legitimate publishers. Okay. So once we have this kind of data, right, you can surmise that blue means humans, red means bots. Okay. So now what we can do for advertisers, we can now compare the relative quality of the media. Okay. So for example, here you have A, B, and C. Okay. So 3 paid display sources, and you can look at the relative amount of red, dark red versus blue. So let me ask the audience, how would you allocate your budget or reallocate your budget between A, B, and C? Which one would you allocate more budget to, and which one would you allocate less budget to? Okay. Again, I'll give it a second. Everyone type in their answer in the chat. Okay, I think it's pretty obvious. Yes, you would allocate more budget to C because obviously these ads are being shown to humans, right? There's more dark blue here and less dark red. Yeah, that's great. Everyone's getting the right answer here. And then you would remove budget or reduce budget to A because clearly much more of it's going to red, which is bots. Okay. If you look at D and E, which are both paid search, you'll see that there's not a significant difference. So in this case, you may not need to do anything with respect to paid search, right? They both look kind of okay. Paid social, F, you can see it's doing really well because it's got a lot of dark blue. I can tell you that's Facebook. And then paid social, G, look, the very little dark blue and a lot of red. Yeah, I can tell you that's Twitter. Okay, so again, once you have this kind of data, you can then adjust your budgets between the different sources. And obviously native is not doing very well, so I might even recommend turning off native altogether, okay, unless there's a specific reason you want to. Okay, so let me close out by this section, and then we'll go on to the interactive fraud hunting. Okay, so this was one client where we looked across 8 different paid sources that they were using, right? They were using every source that they could imagine. And you can very clearly see the differences in quality across the channels. Right, so you might be surprised to see TikTok at nearly 100% red, but that's an example of where there's something called audience network. Right, so if you're doing ads on TikTok, you want to make sure your ads stay on TikTok because that's where the humans are. There's something called audience extension or audience network where their ads go to other mobile apps. So these are apps that are not TikTok. So in that case, again, just like the search partners or just like Facebook audience network, anytime we're dealing with audience network, those outside sites and apps have the motive and the means to commit fraud, right? So they will do that in order to earn more money. So if your ads go to those audience network, you're going to be seeing much larger impressions, much larger clicks, but most of those are going to be fraudulent. And that's what we're seeing in the data here. Okay. So I'm going to pause for a second here, see if there's any questions before we move on to the last section, which is a little bit more interactive. I'm going to show you some data, and we're going to ask the audience for feedback on it.
There's a question from Olivia asking why Instagram is so low,
yeah.
or mainly blue.
So this was an example where they turned off Facebook audience network. So then the ads are running only on Instagram. So I think this one was a little bit smaller sample set, but because FAN, Facebook Audience Network, was turned off, the ads were doing very well, and the people who clicked through from Instagram were we detected as humans. Okay, so this might be an outlier. Yeah.
Okay, so we can take that as a general advice. You know, be very cautious about the audience networks or whatever
Correct.
They call it.
Yeah, because those generate enormous volume, enormous clicks, but it's using fraudulent techniques to do so. So even though you think you're getting a lot of clicks, it may not be very valuable to you. Okay, so keeping in mind, blue means humans and red means bots. Let me just show you a few more slides before we get into the interactive section. I just want to show you how different bot traffic looks like on different sites. So in this example, you see the bots come in very large spikes. Okay, so you see the red right here in the middle, and then you see the big surge in volume here in the green bars at the bottom. Okay, so these come in very large surges, but very short period of time. In this example, the dark red bots are coming continuously to the site. Okay, and then you see this yellow right here in the middle. Yellow means search crawlers. So Google search, Bing crawlers, right? We differentiate them from the red bots. Okay. Here's another example. The red is kind of constant throughout. And then we have a little bit more the search crawlers coming to the site. In some cases, the publishers do want the search crawlers to come to their site, but this is a little bit too much, right? The search crawlers are coming way too often. Okay, so we don't want it to come to the site this much. Okay. Here's another example where we have orange and red. Orange in our charts means declared bots. These are the bots that honestly say their name, right? They declare themselves to be bots. So we don't mark them as dark red, which means malicious. Okay. And then here's another example where you can actually tell when the when the declared crawlers hit the page, right? So they started right at August 20th and they continued. Okay, so you can basically see all the different bot patterns on the site. Okay, and here's an example where we can see that a publisher started buying traffic, right? You can tell exactly when they started buying traffic. Okay, so I like to use this phrase at the top: bought traffic equals bot traffic. Because if you buy the traffic, there's not a whole bunch of humans sitting around with nothing to do but to go to your website when you tell them to. Okay, so when you buy the bot traffic and you get a reliable amount of traffic, that's probably not humans, right? Even if the legacy fraud detection companies cannot detect it as fraud. Okay, I think there's a question that came in. Is there a way to detect fake clicks from Google Ads? Yes. So basically, if you use Fou Analytics, this is my tool, and you're seeing all these screenshots from my tool. If you put it on your landing pages, that's where we can actually help you detect the difference between human clicks and bot clicks. Okay, so you're welcome to use that afterwards. Okay.
There's also another question coming in about when you talk about the programmatic buying here, whether it's bought using inclusion lists or just running open.
Yeah, auctions. A lot of these were run on open, so there's a lot more problems with open. But let me talk about why inclusion lists are not the complete solution, right? Using inclusion lists is much, much better. Okay, so you definitely should use that. But if in that inclusion list, you have a couple of websites that are cheating, right? So even mainstream sites have given into the pressure or the temptation to cheat using bot traffic, right? Because none of the fraud detection companies caught the bot traffic. So they said, oh, well, they marked it as okay, so we might as well do that, right? So if the sites are actually buying bot traffic or they're doing other fraudulent techniques like refreshing the ad slot every 1 second or refreshing the page every 3 seconds, right? All of those forms of fraud are still going to impact your campaign, right? So definitely use an inclusion list where you can, because there's too many bad guys out there. You can't block them all using a block list. So inclusion list is definitely the right way to go, but just have a way to check even the ones in your inclusion list. We want to make sure that they're not using fraudulent means like bot traffic to inflate their numbers.
And in all fairness, I know that this is something that the Danish media agencies work a lot with, what they call whitelist or inclusion lists as well. They, in my understanding, are doing a great work there. But whether it's enough, I obviously can't say.
Yeah, that's definitely a step in the right direction. So they definitely should continue using inclusion list, but we can use the Fou Analytics platform both to measure on the sites, right? So we can see the clicks coming from Google ads and maybe YouTube ads and whatever. And then where possible, we can also use the in ad tag and measure the ad impressions to see where they went and whether a bot loaded the ad or not. Okay, so again, anyone who's on this webinar, you're welcome to use Fou Analytics. Just message me afterwards, and then I can set you up with an account. Okay, so again, you can test this yourself to see. All right, so for the next 15 minutes or 10 minutes, we're going to do an interactive fraud hunting workshop. So this is the first time you're looking at this kind of data, but I think what I've done is I've used these slides when I talk to marketing students in graduate school and undergrad, and they found it very useful to kind of see some real data and make some decisions from it. So in each case, I'm going to show you two charts labeled A and B, and then ask you a question. Okay, so let's just get started on this one. Where would you prefer to place your ads, A or B? So I'm going to give you 15 seconds. Everyone type their answer into chat quickly. This one should be pretty obvious because you can see the color coding already in there. All right, I see the question, the answers coming in. All right, most everyone says A, and that would be the right answer, because here, it's a website where we're actually showing the ads to humans. So that's the dark blue. And so obviously you want to put your ads on a site that has more humans. Down here on B, you can see it's mostly red. So that means the vast majority of the traffic on this website comes from bots. So obviously you don't want to show your ads there. So right answer on the first one. Okay. On this next one, same deal. Which chart shows real human traffic surges, A or B? And specifically, I'm talking about where the green bars go up, right? That's a surge in traffic coming to the website. So which chart shows real human traffic surges, A or B? All right, type your answer into chat. All right. Seems like everyone's getting the right answer. It's B. Okay. So when you look at this annotation, you can see that there's a huge surge in volume right here on February 29th. So it's what I call end of month traffic fulfillment. This is an example of a website that said, okay, we promised to sell so many ads, but we're running behind. And in a panic, they said, oh, let's go out and buy some bot traffic on the very last day of the month so we can hit our number. Okay. So you can see the red line is the one that went up here. Okay, so this entire surge was generated by bots. Whereas in B, this is actually a news site. So when you see these surges in green in the volume, you can also see that the blue line went up. Okay, so this is basically when there's some kind of news and humans go to that news website to look up that news item. Okay, so everyone got the right answer. The real traffic surges was B. Okay, so now I'm going to make it harder. I'm going to take out the colors and ask which chart shows fake or source traffic, A or B. So again, everyone type your answer into chat. Okay, final answer. Okay, whoever said B, you'd be correct, right? B shows the fake or source traffic. And a very telltale sign is these vertical lines. Okay, so basically this is when the botnet was turned on, so the red went up. And then you can see the botnet was turned off, the red went down. Okay, so whenever you see straight lines in analytics, something's wrong with that. Right? I've seen over 20 years of doing analytics. When you see straight lines, something's not natural. Okay, whereas in A, you can actually see the ups and downs, right? So there's more humans visiting the site during waking hours, and then overnight, humans go to sleep, so you're supposed to have lower traffic. So you're supposed to see ups and downs and ups and downs. Okay, and what you're looking at here, you can almost tell this is Sunday, and then Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So these 5 days have higher volume, and then Saturday has lower volume, right? So this is what I call 5+2 pattern, where 5 weekdays have more traffic, and the 2 weekend days have less traffic. Okay, so let's do another one. Which chart shows source traffic, A or B? I kind of gave away the answer already, but type in the chat which one shows the fake traffic. Okay, final answer. It's going to be A. Okay, and the reason for that is you see these green volume bars right here? They're exactly the same hour after hour. There's no up and down, right? So humans go to sleep at night, so it's supposed to go down, right? If you see the same exact amount of traffic or impressions every hour of every day, something's wrong with that, and it warrants further investigation, right? And then the one down here, you see the up and down. Okay, so let me end with this slide, and this is kind of a mix and match, right? So you see 3 charts here, A, B, and C. And then you see 3 types here. So investment information website, video entertainment site, and then sports information site. What you need to do is determine which goes with which. All right, so just type that into chat. I'll give you a little bit more time, so 20 seconds to type in your answer. This is basically about looking at patterns and on the chart, not even so much the colors.
That's a hard one.
Okay. I see some answers coming in. Everyone type in their answers if you have a guess. Even a guess is fine. Okay. All right, 5 more seconds. Okay, we got a mix of answers. So let me actually tell you what's what, and reveal what you're seeing. So in A, we actually see the volume increasing into midnight. So each of these vertical gray lines is when we turn over to the next day. Okay, so you see the volume increasing towards midnight and then dropping off dramatically. So A is actually the video entertainment site, because humans watch streaming, typically in the after dinner time frame. So they watch streaming until midnight and 1 a.m. and then they turn it off and go to bed. Okay, so we see the dramatic drop off. Okay, so this is an example of us measuring on Hulu. Okay, so that's a video entertainment site. And then B is sports information site. So this is actually during football season. So what you'll notice are 2 peaks during Saturday and Sunday, with the smaller peak being Saturday, which is college football here in US, and Sunday is NFL, right, professional football. And you see this pattern repeated every weekend. Okay, so this is the sports information website. And finally, C is the investment information site, because you very clearly see the 5+2 pattern. When Wall Street is open during the weekdays, you'll see the 5 spikes in traffic. And then when Wall Street or the stock market is closed on the weekends, you see almost no traffic. Okay. So again, just by looking at the patterns, we get to understand, this is what certain sites look like. So again, I'm talking about analytics. I'm talking about fraud detection. And long story short is, I think advertisers have the opportunity going forward to look more closely at the topic of ad fraud and have and use better analytics for their digital media. Okay, so I left you with a couple of questions here to ask. Let me just review them relatively quickly for you. So if you're buying programmatic media, you should ask for a DSP report, which tells you how many bids you won, and also ask for an ad server report, which shows you how many ads were served. And those 2 numbers should come out relatively close to each other, right? Because you're supposed to be able to serve an ad for every bid that you won, right? So that's the first thing you can do. Again, without using any specialized tools or new tools, you can already look more closely at your existing digital campaigns. The second is, if you're using a verification vendor, ask them to show you a report that tells you what percentage of ads were actually measured with a JavaScript tag. So if you remember towards the beginning of this presentation, we said that these vendors are not measuring 9 and 10 ads, but yet they are marking those as fraud-free. Okay, that's not correct. So you really need to figure out what percentage of ads they're actually measuring for you. And then finally, if you're using Google Analytics on your site and you're seeing strange behaviors like 100% bounce rates or 1 second time on site, some of that may be due to fraudulent activity and bot activity and ad fraud. Okay, so again, you're welcome to use Fou Analytics next to your Google Analytics so that you can actually start telling those apart. So that's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much, and I'll open it up for questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Fou. And you told me that it's for SMBs, it's actually free
Yes.
to get onboarded in your tool.
That's right. Just send me a message or email afterwards. I'm happy to set up an account for you so you can use it. I basically just have to charge the largest advertisers. If they're doing 1 billion impressions or more, I have to charge something for that.
That sounds about fair enough. While waiting for some questions, there's a lot of talk about cookies disappearing and all that. What would that mean for the fraudulent sites or the bots? Does it have any positive or negative effect in what you will see?
Yeah, actually, cookies going away is not going to really impact ad fraud at all. Bots will continue, trying to load ads and whatever. There is one thing that's kind of a nuance, right? The legacy bot detection companies basically are trying to use cookies to detect the bots and also mark the bots, right? So if they detect a user as a bot, they set a cookie, and they hope that when they see that cookie again, they'll immediately know it's a bot. When cookies go away, it just hurts the ability of those vendors to detect bots. But if you think about it for a second, the bots are more clever than that, right? So if they know that that bot has been caught because the cookie, just can't make any money anymore, the bots are going to dump that cookie and get a new one, right? So basically, they're going to rotate the cookie to defeat the detection, right? So cookies really are not going to mean more or less fraud. It really has to do with the targeting that the advertisers are trying to do.
Okay, thanks. So in your opinion, because I suppose that most of the people watching this today, are doing marketing. They want to create effect. So what are the main things, if you just need to summarize, that they could keep an eye on in terms of getting more effect, more business outcomes of their marketing, and avoid, most of the fraud here?
Yeah, I think, they've already taken a good step, which is using inclusion lists. I can tell you many large advertisers in North America still use block list. And it's almost like you just have to continuously add sites and apps to it just to keep up with the bad guys. So you already took a great step to use inclusion list. But I would also recommend you use a platform like mine to measure the ads and actually see what percentage of fraud you're still exposed to. Because once you can determine that and you can minimize the fraud, then the impact of the ads, like what you talked about earlier, right? You have different ad creatives that are cut from the TV ad. Then the creative will actually have an impact, right? If you're showing those ads to bots, they're not going to have an impact. So it's almost like these two things have to work hand in hand. You have to clean up the bots, reduce the fraud, so that your ad creatives can actually work better, right? So I think overall, we also talked about earlier avoiding the audience networks, because there's rampant amounts of fraud there. And if you simply turn those off, you're going to get much less volume of ads and you're going to get much lower click-through rates, but that's okay because humans don't click on ads that much. The ads will still have an impact if you have good creative. So again, buying super large quantities at super low prices doesn't necessarily mean it's successful, right? Keep an eye on business outcomes and really focus on minimizing the fraud so that your digital marketing can have an effect.
Great. Thanks. There's a question coming in saying in Denmark, Adform is a top 3 DSP, and they have an anti-fraud software. I imagine other DSPs have similar software. How do you rate?
And most of them are using the legacy fraud verification vendors. I don't know that much about Bearskin, but I would highly encourage you, if you're using Adform, to add a Fou Analytics in ad tag, and I can check that for you. Because there's a lot of things, just know that the bots and fraudsters are very clever and very good at disguising themselves. So, my platform, I've tuned for the last 11 years myself, and I'm going to continue upgrading the algorithm. So I believe that we can catch things that their fraud detection tech can't.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot. There seems to be no more questions. So just to end up here, just briefly want to advertise here that the next crash course that we're going to hold is about how to accelerate the digital creativity using AI. Of course, a very popular topic, but we will show some examples how we do it here and give you some inspiration and trends on what you can test also for yourself. It's in November, and the sign up isn't ready yet, but when it is, you're very welcome to joining us. We've done a number of these attention crash courses about loads of topics. Most of them are in Danish, but we show you a lot of examples of the campaigns that we do, how we use video to create attention. We use interaction to keep people engaged and they keep their attention for a long time, so that your marketing have more effect. How to transform your videos into eye-catching digital ads. There are loads of great themes here that you're welcome to watch whenever you have the time. And of course, you're ready to contact us if you want to see, how your marketing could be done in all digital channels in an inspiring way, gaining more attention. And last but not least, we just want to say thanks for your attention and thanks for not being a bot today. I suppose no bots have entered this live room. So right. Thank you for all of you watching. Dr. Fou, thank you so much for a very interesting presentation here, and have a lovely day in New York.
Thank you very much.